Today I want to talk about what I call the retreat gap. And it's something that I see much more clearly during retreat because it's two completely opposite mental states. The first one is when I'm having a good meditation, I'm reflecting on the Buddha, the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, just very inspired and in tune and uplifted, focusing on all the different qualities that the Dharma represents. And it's just, yeah, so incredibly uplifting and peaceful and calming. And then I get to the other state of mind, which is the habitual, afflicted, very common state of mind. And I think I see it so much more clearly because I actually have more time to spend in this positive state of mind. And so when I go back into the normal afflicted state of mind, it feels so painful to really see that, even though I think I'm in that state of mind most of the time when I'm not in retreat or I'm so habituated to it. But it's so I can see it more clearly, and it's so much more pronounced. And it's more noticeable because I actually get longer breaks from those afflicted state of minds. And it's really nice to have many days where I'm not afflicted. And it's like, wow, look at how wonderful this is. And then when the afflicted mind comes back, it's like, it feels extra painful and disappointing and just like, crap, here I am again. But I've come to realize that this is exactly what Dharma practice is all about. It's not just something to, push away from. It's like, this is what we're working on. We're working on lessening that gap so that we're, again, reversing, becoming more familiar with the Dharma state of mind and less familiar with the afflicted state of mind. So I've been also kind of looking at different viewpoints, again, seeing how the mind goes to extremes so often. And the one positive extreme is looking through a view of emptiness and how things actually really exist, that they're not inherently existent, that they're so much more dynamic and multi-layered and, dynamic than I really think. And so you guys know I love little phrases, so I've been playing with one lately is constantly changing, countless causes and conditions in a connected continuum. And so I'll tease this apart a little bit, I'll unpack it. So the first one is constantly changing. And Geshe Tabke, I think, sparked this in me of really by saying that nothing is the same from moment to moment. The self is changing all the time because the basis of designation, our aggregates are changing all the time. So this body that I have, the breath is moment by moment changing. Water and food are coming in and going out several times a day. My thoughts are definitely changing all the time. Sometimes I get very random images from the past that come out of nowhere, but then they go. Feelings, mental states. I can go from awake to sleepy in 2 seconds, or vice versa. And so just looking at that, the body is always constantly changing. I've been playing with just saying to myself that I am not the same person that I was yesterday at this time. It's kind of fun because we have a very regular schedule. So yesterday at this time, we were just saying our lunch prayers, but I was a very different person that I was yesterday, and so were you. I'm not even the same person that I was at the beginning of the last meditation session. And then I'm certainly not the same person that I was when I was 5 years old. So reminding myself that constantly changing is very helpful. And then the next one, countless causes and conditions. Thinking of the infinite causes that influence my thoughts and feelings in this moment, and linking back to what's happened in the day, the past year, this life, past lives, looking at influences from my parents, how they were raised, how they were raised from their parents, causes and conditions from society, from history. And it's just so expanding to keep thinking about these countless causes and conditions that it's vaster than the stars in space or the horseweed seeds that we have in the meadows. It's infinite. And then the last one is a connected continuum, that we're so completely influenced by others, not separate, that we're a huge web of conditions or connections. and really seeing myself as a continuum, that there's nothing to pinpoint and solidify, that life is a constantly flowing river, that there's absolutely nothing to hold on to. And just reflecting on these are very awe-inspiring and flexible and bring a much bigger, joyful perspective. But then the other state of mind, the other extreme that I'm more familiar with, and I've recognized is probably the most extreme and the most painful, is the completely opposite view of the feeling of shame. Because that is a feeling of thinking that I'm separate, that I'm not connected, and that I'm fixed and permanent, and that there's something inherently wrong with me, and unworthy of connection. And so all of those are so painful because it feels so permanent and solid, and it's so painful because it's so completely the opposite from reality. And so it's just been helpful seeing that those two completely contrasting different views. And so the more I'm familiar with reflecting on reality, the constantly changing countless causes and conditions and a connected continuum, that helps loosen up the painful view of shame and seeing that it's so not accurate. Recently I was studying or came across a teaching by Alex Berzin from his Study Buddhism talk on Tantra. And he said something another word that just really helped me loosen things up. He said, these obscuring factors that we have can be removed. They are known as fleeting taints. They don't have a firm basis in the sense that they are not based in reality. They're based on unawareness, which can be refuted and therefore eliminated. Not knowing how things exist can be replaced by knowing how things do exist. Knowing it incorrectly can be replaced by knowing it correctly. And this is something that we hear from Venerable again and again, but I need to keep hearing it again and again and again. So just that word fleeting taints was very, I don't know, I liked that word. Just get rid of the fleeting taints because they're just fleeting. And I've been really enjoying this Tantra practice that we've been doing because it's a totally different approach than the normal logical reasoning and analysis perspective, because it brings a huge side of creativity, which I do have a big creative mind. So reflecting on just the images of Chenrezig can be so soothing and inspiring, and looking at things from a much more fluid perspective rather than that solid sense of self, rather than that fleeting taints kind of view. One thing I've been inspired by is by the lotus, the symbol of emptiness, that it's growing out of the mud. It's growing out of those fleeting taints because they're not permanent. It's growing out of the muck of the afflictions and the confusion, and it's completely untainted by it. And it's rising above that. Another image I love is Chenrezig standing very tall and confident. Kind of unshakable strength and determination to help with that compassionate heart, not slumping down and hiding out of the weight of the sorrows of the world, but standing tall and courageous and active, paying attention and not passive and just kind of checked out in their own bliss, but actually actively engaged and incredibly confident. And then, of course, when I'm imagining, that first thing that I focus on is imagining being looked at with complete acceptance and understanding, coming from a place of total understanding, coming from that place of complete wisdom of how things are, of all the causes and conditions that bring each moment about, and how all the causes that cause me and others to act in certain ways, and coming from a place of, even knowing all of that, coming from a place of pure acceptance and love. And so since Chenrezig understands reality as it is, knows the whole background much, much better than I do, then why do I not trust Chenrezig? Why do I think I know better than Chenrezig does? And so it's helpful of just, putting that into perspective. If I'm judging myself and blaming myself, then I don't know the whole picture. And the same goes for others. If I'm judging them, then I don't know the full picture. Chenrezi's looking at them with complete love and acceptance, so maybe I should follow that lead. And especially, I don't know what their motivation is. Chenrezi does, but I don't know what their motivation is. And I think this gets me into a lot of trouble in imputing motivation, and usually it's a harmful motivation somehow trying to hurt me. And that's often not correct. I had a boss once that gave me the good advice of like, always assume a positive intent, and that can be incredibly helpful to follow. A couple weeks ago, we heard a talk from Daniel Kozert, who was a student of Jeffrey Hopkins and is now a retired professor, and he said a couple points that I've been chewing on. One was he cited the book Blink from Malcolm Gladwell, and he said that dogs are better at guessing intentions than humans are. I really liked that because I was like, I think that's really true. Dogs are pretty accurate of knowing when someone's has the intention of harm and when someone has the intention of being a benefit, and I'm not so good at that. And yeah, it can go a long way in really thinking that people have a good intention. And this goes along the lines of what Venerable SK was saying last week in her teaching, that there's no one that does not want to benefit others, and that everybody really has the seed for compassion, and we're all trying our best. I mean, we all have these very afflicted, tainted minds that are confused, but deep down, we're all trying to help. We're all trying to do our best. And that's very comforting to come back to and remember. Another point that Daniel Kozert talked about was he was citing a sociologist, I guess, from the 19th century, Charles Cooley, who said, "I am not what I think I am, and I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am." And it says it's how we think of ourselves is how we think, i.e. assume or impute, others think of us. And that leaves the door wide open for so much wrong views and misinterpretation, especially considering how we impute so much from our past conditioning and all the layers of things that aren't really seeing things as they are. On an unconscious level, I'm bringing in all those past causes and conditionings and applying them to the current situation, whether it's relevant or not. And most of the time, it's completely irrelevant and unconnected. He said that our self-image is based on what we think our self-image is what we think our social image is, what society thinks of us, what society tells us we should be, which is so totally not accurate. And it's also dependent on others, which is coming from others, they're afflicted as well. And he was saying that status anxiety is one of our number one worries of how do we fit in society, which really goes back to that never-ending question of, am I good enough? Which wastes so much time. But I was reflecting that it's like, this is a really ancient habit, because this question of, am I good enough in society goes back to, is 4 of the 8 worldly concerns that the Buddha taught. So this has been happening for a really long time, of attachment to praise and reputation and fear of criticism or rejection. So the Buddha recognized these 2,600 years ago. So this is a long-standing problem that we've got to work with. But sadly, nowadays, Western society has just found a way to capitalize on it and try to make money off it, which just makes the problem a million times worse. So instead of projecting all these inaccurate views, let's turn to trusting Chenrezi, who's a fully enlightened being who really sees reality as it is, understands and accepts us completely, and also knows our highest potential, which is to become fully awakened. And so in meditation, I was thinking, what if we really did view ourselves not from how we think others think of us, but viewing ourselves through this prayer that we say of, may anyone who merely sees, hears, remembers, touches, or talks to me be freed in that very instant from all sufferings and abide in happiness forever. What if we viewed our self-image of that way? Like, wow, okay, people, see me because I want to help you and may you be happy. That's a totally different view that I would like to try. So, so let's take joy and confidence that we are being by the absolutely best guide possible, And as we do this very, very noble work of lessening the gap of our wrong views, we can dissolve our current confused and inaccurate view of ourselves and others, and to be more in alignment with how a Buddha sees us, and in that way we can truly be of greatest possible help to all others.